everybody's doing all right. We're having another great day here in Durham, North Carolina. Of course, we get ready to do a conversation on Friday at the Hayti Heritage Center with a great guest that we'll have at that particular time and everything like that. So Bakari Sellers will be joining us at the Hayti. There'll be a conversation with Brian Kennedy and a young lady. They'll be discussing politics and a number of other things that are taking place at that particular discussion that is part of the Hayti series and part of the Hayti season and all along those lines. I know a lot of people are paying attention to the weather. It is definitely still very hot on the outside. As a matter of fact, I think it's like in the low 90s, but probably feels like closer to 100. And we're in the middle of this heat wave and drought and all along those lines. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to the World Cup and what's going on with that. I know that Spain knocked out France, and right now the game is going on between Argentina and England, and I'm not sure who's winning, but I'll try to find that out and see what kind of details are going on in that space as well. So, like I said, a lot's going on in the world, and we're always glad to be having conversations with a lot of great folks and seeing what's happening in their world and what they've got going on as well. So, I want to bring in some of our folks and see what they've got taking place and see what's going on in their life and everything like that. So, I'll bring in Sean G and Will Ingram and see what's happening in their world. As we're always glad to have folks in the online dinner party and see what's happening in their world. I know a lot of folks are involved in music and things like that because I know that even the Fruit of Labor just released a recent album and everything like that. So definitely there's a lot of things going on in that world and along that line. So how are you gentlemen doing today? And hope y'all are trying to stay warm in this crazy heat and just tell folks a little bit about some of the things that y'all have got going on. Because like I said, on the online dinner party, I just invited various people in and we learn from each other and we try to say what's happening in our various worlds and all along those lines. So definitely always glad to have amazing guests and to see what's shaking in their world. So how are you doing today, Will? And tell folks about what's going on with the RCCFPE and what some of the things that y'all got going on. Because I know that definitely Mr. Angaza told me y'all got a lot of things taking place and a lot of justice work that is taking place in the world.
Yes, sir. Hey, it's good to be on the show. Thanks for having us on today.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee, I'll tell you a little bit about us. I'm just a retired military veteran. I served in the military for quite some time, and then I came back home and I wanted to farm here in Richmond County. And kind of, we always grew up with animals, always had, kind of that farm life. So it was just something that we were kind of eager to get back here to, with my dad and my mom. So I mean, we're grateful to just have them here with us, still here.
Yeah, and that whole notion of generational wealth and maintaining generations is very important and everything like that. And I know that that's something that even in Hollister, Halifax County, where my mom was raised at, we've definitely tried to keep that land and property going. I know that mom had three sisters, and now she's just down to one sister because we just laid to rest one of my aunts about 3 weeks ago or something along those lines. But she definitely kept some of the territory and some of the family in our history and in our family because definitely even after she passed it on to her siblings and all along those lines. And I know that that's what happened with my Aunt Carolyn and Uncle Skip when they passed. One of my cousins has got that land, and we're definitely trying to make sure that the land stays in the family because too often our land escapes us and everything like that. Because I know even Angaza sometimes talks about what went on with Shiloh, and we know that that's the area where the airport is here, that is all along those lines and everything like that. Because I remember I first met Angaza when I was working at the Carolinian, and he was involved in a lot of work that people forget about. Even though we've been dealing with food rights for a number of years, there was a case with Shoney's, which is where I first met him, and everything like that, because he was involved in a lot of the protests against the Shoney's, where they were trying to get fair wages and all in that space. And that was back in the 80s. That's when I first came back from Marquette and everything like that. So I just remember the whole case, a little bit about it around Shoney's and the work that he was doing even back then and everything like that. So how did y'all first get involved with Angaza, and tell me a little bit about y'all's involvement with Fruit of Labor?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you mentioned Shiloh freehold. So that's what I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so Shiloh, and you know, we're farmers in Richmond County. Richmond County, we're in Rockingham, North Carolina, not to be confused with Richmond, Virginia, or all the other Richmonds. We're on the border of Cheraw, South Carolina, and Rockingham.
Right.
So that's where we're located. We're farmers. I'm a retired Navy. So you know, we have issues around clean water, and meeting Gaza and the Fruit of Labor and Black Workers for Justice. A lot of work that they did around the Imperial Foods fire in Hamlet, where 25 Black women were murdered. They advocated for his imprisonment, in which, you know, he did go to prison. But you know, as farmers in Richmond County, and Black landowners, and you know, having our family farm and things of that nature, and trying to continue our legacy, you know, industrial pollution has occurred for years, starting from that incident with the Imperial Foods fire, where those women were murdered. So you know, we've been lone advocates in our community, but with Shiloh and Black Workers for Justice and the Fruit of Labor, understanding about our family farm and being current farmers, and the pollution that exists in Richmond County, with issues along the lines with Enviva, which is a wood pellet mill, also industries, meat packing plant industries like Purdue, that are terrorizing our workers and poisoning our local streams and rivers, and dumping waste. Other things like this Amazon data center,
Right.
right? So connecting with Black Workers for Justice, connecting with the Fruit of Labor around these social issues, land issues in our Black communities, our indigenous communities. We've been here since, I like to say, time immemorial.
Right.
So and we have a lot to talk about. We have to a lot to discuss, and how we come with solutions around Black land loss, around our farming communities, around our Black working communities, and how it relates to, you know, the pollution and contaminants in the water, and how do we make this not just a movement but an actionable item. And I'll let Will talk about the Richmond County Coalition for Justice and Black Empowerment and its founding.
Yeah, please do tell us a little bit about that founding and everything like that. Because as y'all were talking, I was thinking about the incidences, because it's not just here in North Carolina, but it's throughout the country as well. Because I know there was a lot of issues around water contaminant in Michigan and other places as well. So I know that even though Justice, Black Workers for Justice is known around this area in the Southeast, I do know that y'all also pay attention to a lot of things that are taking place nationally and even internationally as well, and everything like that. So I think that y'all have been involved to some degree with the fight, that what's been going on in Detroit, and some of the things that have been going on. So definitely share with us a little bit about the founding of the organization, and maybe even some of the alliances that y'all are working with. Because I know, talking to Ngaza, I was remembering that it was a few years back that we went down. I went down with a friend of mine that was a comedian, and we went down to Charleston at the Longshoremen Union when they had the conference down there and everything like that. So I was down there with y'all in that particular space. I think that was maybe, it was before the pandemic, so it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and all along those lines. But definitely share with us a little bit about the founding of your organization, and even some of the alliances that y'all share with other people that are going through some of these fights, like the folks in Detroit.
Well, you know, just making that connection with, you know, Black Workers for Justice and their connection with our community, about advocating just for not contaminating our land and our water, right? You know, they had, what is it, Copers company there polluting contaminating their land. Here in Richmond County, you know, many of the folks here can't drink their water. It's not drinkable. I mean, it looks like dark, muddy water, and it's not just because of settlement. This is because of, like Flint, Michigan, and other communities like that. The infrastructure is just outdated, and you know, with these new corporations coming in and sitting where they sit, and in our Black community, specifically here in Richmond County, most of the corporations that moved in, and they only replaced the old mills, the exact location that the old mills used to sit and get, all of their free energy, because they had, the mills. It was a windmill that was a water mill that was running behind it. And so it was free energy. And so a lot of those places, they moved in where they didn't have to outsource for anything. It was really free enterprise. It's what you call capitalism, right? At the detriment of the community. And so there was a lot of promises made way back in 1950s and the 60s during urban renewal to bring new housing and new infrastructure to our communities. And, some part of those things did happen. But here we are in 2026, 2026 with the same issue. So we came back home, just looking into this situation of what's going on with our family members. There was a high rate of cancer issues in our community. A lot of people were on asthma pumps. A lot of people are having to go to dialysis, and they're from the age of 30 to 50. And that's not, I'm only 44. And so when I recognized that a lot of people that I grew up with they were passing away in their sleep, they were passing away from having to do dialysis and put through that strenuous situation. And, the numbers are too high here in Richmond County for us not to bring red flags to us as military veterans, and also just as people from here that really want to make sure that our family members are protected. And so that's what made us connect with Black Works for Justice and organize Richmond County Coalition for Justice and Black Empowerment, so that our community would have somewhere to go to voice their opinions. And not only that, to get their water tested. That's our water camp. That's what we offer, is our water campaign, is to offer free water testing for our residents. And that's the only thing we knew the first thing to do is to kind of what is in our water, so that we can actually have an honest conversation about what is here, what's happening, what is in our air. And so that's what made the creation of the coalition, is just that. And so we're a coalition that brings in other organizations like Black Works for Justice, like Blueprint North Carolina, Clean Water for North Carolina, Clean Air for North Carolina. And we want to bring those organizations here to Richmond County so that we don't have to restart all the work that's going on around North Carolina.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything, because I grew up in Warrenton, North Carolina, and a lot of people know that Warrenton was one of the founding organizations of kind of the environmental justice movement, because of the intentional dumping that was done by corporations way back in the late 70s, early 80s, and everything like that. So they were trying to find a dumping ground, and they chose something that was a poor area, but also a minority rich area that had a lot of native population as well as African American populations, and they intentionally did the dumping in that environment. So even coming back to your thoughts around urban renewal, we were talking yesterday on Urban Sentinel, which is another show that we do here on Pod TV, about how the highways were not done accidentally, and a lot of times they were done in poor neighborhoods and were put in neighborhoods that had a rich history, like the old Black Wall Streets of Durham and everything like that. And that was not done accidentally. It was done intentionally by the government and all along those lines. And even recently, I had learned, I was watching Instagram and social media and heard about a town called Friendship. And I think that that's over there, like you're heading toward Fayetteville, but it's part of the Falls Lake community and all along those lines, because apparently y'all are both military veterans and everything like that. There were some intentional efforts to create lakes, man-made lakes, by kind of like burying over existing communities. And apparently Friendship was a minority community that existed in North Carolina and all along those lines, but it is actually what is at the bottom of Falls Lake and everything like that. I think there were two other towns. I don't remember their names off the top of my head and everything, but it seems like they were poor neighborhoods that were intentionally flooded because they might not have had many residents or any residents at that particular point and all along those lines. And that's what they created Falls Lake and probably some of the other lakes that exist as well. So it sounds like both the lakes and the highways were intentionally created as a way to destroy vibrant communities and everything like that. So I just wondering, if y'all has heard of this story about Friendship and some of the other intentional efforts to kind of destroy our historical neighborhoods, even like the way that they destroyed the Black Wall Street, not just here, but down in Florida and other places as well. So how much of this history have y'all learned or been learning just in your own research and everything like that?
Well, great point that you make for Richmond County and Rockingham. We always talk about our history in Richmond County being so historical, dating back to before the founding of the United States. And that's our family and community historical records. So, with that being said, we live on one of the biggest rivers in between the state of North and South Carolina, which is the Great PD River, which sits alongside Richmond County and Anson County. Anson County was created in around 1749 from which would be at one point Bladen County. So with that historical record and knowing that the Great PD River in our historical record, that when we look into these dams, we look into these lakes, we go into Montgomery County, you go into Stanley County, these other surrounding counties of Richmond County, the rich history is there about how they drove these highways, how they built these dams. We have West Baden, which is in West Baden, which is in Montgomery and Stanley County. I'll let Will, really give some background on some of the lakes in our communities, historical Black communities that have been excavated, right? That's the word. They have been excavated to the point of a no return. And there's a lot of historical records that Will can speak to, and I'll let him have the floor on that.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, you asked that question of how much have we researched. I mean, we live here, so it wasn't much that we needed to do in an aspect of research because we grew up with our elders, right? And in our community, we listen to our elders. So just listening to them go to work and tell us with the new developments of when Purdue first came here, we were actually that generation in between of the horse and buggy. Right. And I know it's funny, but it's literally there were still people when we grew up in the 80s and the 90s that still use the horses and buggies. Some people still do it today voluntarily. And some people refuse to get cars and drive right where we live at just because they've never wanted it. They never wanted to be a part of that. And so, contacting with people like the concerned citizens of West Baden over in Stanley County, Montgomery County, one of the organizers over there, his name is Richard Leak. He worked at a place called Alcoa, and a lot of folks don't know the history of Alcoa here locally. Alcoa, when it was first organized back in the early 1900s by the Reynolds family, a lot of Black displacement happened over there. Baden Lake is there because that was the property farmland that belonged to indigenous Black people. There's a site over there named the Hardaway site that is tracked a part of where we come from, which is called the PD Culture Settlement, right? Town Creek Indian Mound. That's where our family members are buried at. There's 28 known sites. One of our elders in our community, he always advocated for protecting our land and our water and making sure that it wasn't contaminated. Back in 1983, there's a doctor in Ellerby. His name was Dr. Rankin. And Dr. Rankin, he notified the EPA consistently, and he was updating them, telling them, hey, you can't build these dams. You can't do this because you're going to pollute these sites. You're going to uncover these burial sites. He said, we identified 28 known sites here in Richmond County, between here and Stanley and Richmond County. And if you flood this area, it's going to not only contaminate our water and contaminate these natural areas where eagles, fly and nest year round, but it's also going to uncover many of these burial sites. And, they looked at that as an opportunity for them to go in during that period and intentionally excavate this land, remove these bodies of these persons and our family members from these mounds, And sometimes they used the land, and sometimes they used the dirt, and sometimes they didn't. Right? But we always knew they existed here. We always knew these things were here. It's just the fact that other people knew they were here too, and they had a purpose. So it's not only about flooding people's land and not using it and then creating a false sense of the need for electricity. A lot of folks already had this a source of electricity if they wanted it.
Yeah.
Right? This was the environment. It was a different culture, and it was a group of people who were very distinct with who we were. And we were one of the last freeholds of people who still owned and maintained and lived on and cultivated on and fished on their own land. Right? And that's what we share with Shiloh.
Yeah,
It's that history, right?
Yeah.
And so we're well aware of these companies. It's nothing new that they come in and create a new surprise $13.1 billion investment for Amazon and tell our community that's going to provide at least 500 to 800 jobs, when we know that only 50 to 80 jobs are left after all the construction is done. And of those jobs, 50 of those jobs would more than likely be security, maintenance teams. It's nothing that our people in our community would be able to do.
Yeah,
Right.
we're in a lot about these data centers and other things that are supposed to be impacting communities and supposed to be this great economic boom, but in a lot of ways they sound like they could be detrimental to our society. And I don't know if they're thinking about creating any in y'all's area where y'all are at, but I do know they've been talking about some in this area around the triangle, and there's even been some places around the country that have put a moratorium on the use of these data centers and everything like that. So I just wanted y'all's take on this, because you do have like these big corporations like Amazon, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, and even some of the other big societal corporations that are talking about this gain that they're going to give us and everything like that. But I am the staff historian among one of my other jobs at the Hayti Heritage Center, and I know that even in that course we talk about how sometimes we can be our own worst enemies and everything like that. So we can sometimes allow ourselves to be talked into some of these opportunities, or what are perceived to be opportunities, but they say that there was something like $350 million, and that's in the times that they wrote this particular estimate. So it might even be closer to like 400 or maybe even $500,000 of money that was destroyed when Black Wall Street was kind of destroyed by the highways and everything like that. And I think it's like over 500 businesses or something like that that were destroyed as well. So how important do you think it is for us to preserve our heritage and not make the mistakes of the past? Because we do know that even some of our own people were promised, given promises, and some of those promises were intentionally not kept, whether it was given the promise of putting in some land or giving us housing or a number of other things. And some of these promises were not ever intended to be kept, and some of them were done intentionally. And then, of course, we do have some of our own folks in our community that, if I can put it bluntly, kind of sold us down the river and everything like that. So how important do you think it is for us to be aware of our history and not make the mistakes of the past?
I'll take I think it's very important. We have to do our own independent research as Black people. We have to do our own independent research. We can't take someone else's opinion about who we are as status, right? We have to be willing to read it, write it, comprehend it, right, and interpret it in a way that it helps our people.
Yeah.
So that's first, being able to understand who we are, where we are, and don't allow others and outside people to tell us who we are, how we got here. That's the issue. I'm 42 years old. My parents, my grandparents have always told me since I was a little boy who I was, who my grandparents were, who my aunts and uncles were, who their grandparents were, where they came from, where they sprouted from, what land we had, what land we do have, where we farmed, what plantation we came from, what education we received, how we received it, when it was established and organized. My daughter is 16 years old. and she can repeat everything that I'm saying
Wow.
verbatim.
Wow.
That is the answer.
Yeah, we definitely got to teach our young people and all along those lines. So that is very much the answer. Now, the other thing, and I kind of alluded to it before, that society has been very good at it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I'll start with you, Will, but definitely want to hear from Sean as well, is the whole notion of divide and conquer. Most of us have family members that are maybe more inclined to be proud of their native roots, and nothing wrong with being proud of your native roots and everything along those lines. But definitely there are attempts, and I know even attempts in some of our counties to the south, to divide the native population from the African American population and find ways to divide it versus finding ways to build coalitions the way that y'all are doing and everything like that. Because I know there have been some tensions between, say, the African American population and the Lumbee population and some other populations as well. So, but it seems like that is sometimes done intentionally as a way to divide and conquer by some of the established leadership and everything like that. So I just wondered how y'all address that and how y'all try to get past some of these divide and conquer techniques.
Well, I'll say that I don't, growing up with Lumbees, you know what I mean? Our whole life, we went to school with Lumbees. We went to school with Croatans. We went to schools with people who called themselves Cherokees. You know what I mean? My grandmother said she's a Cherokee. You know what I mean? So there's really, that's imaginary, right? We can look at Facebook and look at videos all day, but in the communities, we live in communities, mixed communities, right? And the divide and conquer tactic has always been there. But when you know who you are and you own your land and you live on your land and there's nobody that can tell you any different, and you can fight because you have a militia to protect yourself, right? Like our history tells us, right? Nobody could tell us who we were, right? And so this is the same thing today. So there's no fight with anybody, right? I understand that 575, the Lumbees have been recognized, man. That's awesome news. It doesn't take away from my heritage, right? I know I know where I come from. I know the people that I come from. So if anybody's interested in hearing or knowing who we are, they know where we live at. We're here in Richmond County, right? So we open the door always to any other American Indian or indigenous group that identifies like we do, because there is no separation. People can choose, when you're autonomous, you can choose to identify however it is that you want. But what we want to make sure and assure about ourselves is that we know what our grandparents told us. We know what our grandfathers said to our parents when they're alive, right? We know what they said. They knew who they were. There was no confusion. And so when we talk about the historical narrative of divide and conquer, I mean, we can go back to several different periods, right? We can go back to 1677 or 1676 during Bacon's Rebellion, right? And the Queen of Pamunkeys, right? She signed a treaty with King Charles, right? When she signed that treaty with him, it was to protect her lands and her sovereignty. And when they started making those groups of people Negro and started calling them and identifying them as different things to take them away from their land and the treaties and calling them Negroes, guess what happened next? There was other treaties that happened in the 1700s, 1723. There's another treaty made in North and South Carolina where those same specific groups of Indians united and removed down to Richmond and Anson County, right, where we are. And they protected themselves by creating the courthouse, by creating a militia, by creating their own brigades, right? Town Creek Indian Mound Settlement was just one out of 64 that we know of up and down the corridor of the PD River Basin. And so just knowing that we came from a group of people who knew that a long time ago that these thoughts and these ideas of other groups of people, because they knew how rich our land was here. And that is the reason that so many people come to America, is because we know that it's the land of milk and honey, right? And we know that there's an illusion of an American dream. And that dream should not come at the detriment of our people. We want to share our land. We've always shared our land with everybody that's came here. You know what I mean? We've always shared it, right? But in 1769, we had enough, right? After we got our land, we petitioned in 1769. We were the very first in America to fight and create a constitution, right, for our people, right? And we said, we will not be taxed without representation. This is our land. We recognize who we are. You can call us white, black, mixed blood, doesn't matter what it is. This is on paper and documented. It's not me talking. This is documented, right? And it's a historical value that if you don't open a book and you don't read and you don't search for these things, you'll never find it, right? But they advocated for it in 1769. So what was the reason that we were fighting in 1776? And then people in 1790 started identifying as one or two things on a federal census record that had nothing to do with state rights or state sovereignty, right? And so preserving our history and the divide and conquer tactic, you know, one of the last times that they did it was in 1866, right? And then they tried to tell us that, you know, you guys are Negroes. But hey, somebody 200 years before us said, hey, we ain't Negroes in Virginia. We're Indians. We already know that, right? We're indigenous to this land. So stop trying to remove us off of paper, right? And so when we're able to do that, and along with the Lumbees, we understand, we recognize them, right? We just want people to look at us and recognize us and stop telling us who we are when we know who we are. We came from a place, right? All of our people came from a place, a specific place, and we came there for a reason. We were all being treated a certain type of way, and we didn't just go along with it. And so it took a long time before people knew where we were. Before they knew where we were here in Richmond County.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and all along those lines. I know that a lot of times people don't realize the importance of the militia, even in our own communities and everything like that. But I just wondered, could you speak to that historically? Because I know that even being a fan of the Black Panthers when I was growing up and everything like that, I do know the importance of even us having our own the ability to defend ourselves in our communities and all along those lines. And that's actually kind of what the Black Panthers were about. And they brought a lot of positive things to the community that people don't realize they should get credit for, whether that's the Head Start programs or whether that's some of the feeding the elderly and the poor programs that exist that the government took over and all along those lines. But I just wondered y'all's thoughts around this notion of us having our own militias and everything like that. I know that definitely Malcolm X was a supporter of that, and we had our own Malcolm X school here in Durham in the late 60s until the early 70s and everything like that in that space. But there were even some of the people that were into the peace movement, Martin Luther King, that talked about us. I think his quote was, I did not realize I was bringing my people into a burning house and everything along those lines and everything like that. So how important do you think it is for us to understand the impact of the militia and the military, and maybe even us having our own ability to defend ourselves?
Well, I'll say this, and I'll pass it to Big Bro. My philosophy is that we're only as sovereign as what we can protect.
Right.
And that's where we are in America, right? And Malcolm X, you know, is my childhood hero. First book I ever read. And really put me in the mindset of protecting myself and my people. And I'll tell this story. When I joined the Navy, in my first week in boot camp, you know, we're all lined up, you know, like robots, you know, at attention, and my recruit division commanders are coming in and they're asking the question, who all came in here to die for your country, right? Everybody raised their hand like popcorn. I didn't raise my hand. I called it the unpopped kernel. And they came to me and they said, Seaman Recruit Ingram, you didn't come here to die for your country? I said, no, I came here to make other people die for theirs. For what they believe in. I'm not dying. We're not here to die. We're here to live.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that, Will? Because I know that even the legendary boxer Muhammad Ali talked about that in his own thing when he was a boxer, and he was letting folks know that he had converted to the Nation of Islam and everything like that. I know that one of his quotes was that either the Vietnam or the Viet Cong had not done anything to him and all along those lines. So he was not going to go fight against them when it was actually people in his own country that had caused problems and not necessarily those in the country that we were fighting at that particular time. So I think that he did some voluntary resistance and all along those lines and refused to serve because of his own moral consciousness and everything in that space. So I just wondering, you served in the military, maybe you got a story similar to Sean and everything like that, but how much of that kind of like people that were doing resistance, whether it was Muhammad Ali or whether it was others that were doing it as well? I think that definitely Kareem Abdul-Jabbar also converted to the Nation of Islam as well. There was a number of others that did that also. So what is your take on this notion of kind of like not wanting to go into war if you're going to be fighting against people that were of the same shade as yourself?
Well, I'll start with a little quote that I heard from someone in South Carolina named Eartha Kitt.
Yeah.
Right. And she mentioned about Vietnam War. She was a big advocate, for the Black soldiers or soldiers in general coming back from that war and being faced, with all the things that they had been taught were wrong in other places. And they came home and experienced the exact same thing. And then somebody else in another group of folks, not their fault, but they came here and they were given those same jobs and refused to the indigenous Black people that actually should have had them, just because of their home base. And so I think about that all the time. But, I served a lot of time overseas and I did do some combat, and well, not some, it was quite a bit of combat. But, my main intention for going there, like Sean said, was not to lose my life. You know what I mean? But I understand, when you're young, you get to make all kinds of decisions. You are, you're powerful. You don't think you could die. You don't think anything can happen to you when you're that young, right? I was 19 years old. It was just something that I knew some of my uncles had did, some of my, ancestors had did, and it was something that we've always done is fight for our country when the need comes. And I joined during 2001 when September 11th happened.
Right.
And so for me, being a college student and being coming from where I came from in this small rural farming community, and then seeing that on the news as I was in a community college setting, it was something that I'd never seen, and then seeing that happen to a building, I thought that could happen in Charlotte. And it triggered, something in me, man, I need to stand up and I need to go and protect my land because this is what my family members have done. Right. And one of my aunt's take is that she said before I left, she said, my main concern, she's about 79 now. And her main concern for me was that she didn't want me to go there and be put on the front lines because in Vietnam War, she heard that a lot of Black soldiers had been placed on the front lines. And that didn't register with me. I thought she was just, she was just telling me something to keep me from going and try to discourage me. But I ended up going. But you have to experience something sometimes in order for you to get the full understanding of it. But coming back here, and one story in particular for me, I came back to Richmond County right after I had redeployed from Iraq. And my very first day landing, coming back, I was pulled over in Rockingham by the Rockingham Police Department. They pulled me over and they took me out of my car. There was about 5 or 6 cars, close to the library. They all surrounded me. And, they said, we know this is you. We know this is you. And so they took me to the police station. They ransacked my car, had my car towed. This is the first day that I landed back from Iraq in the year 2004. And so I said, man, what am I here for? And they wouldn't tell me, but they said, I got a photo. So they put a photo in front of me and walked off from the office. And I looked at the photo and it was a person, a Black male in the photo, that had hair and I didn't have hair. Right. And so I said, wow, obviously this is not me. I just got here yesterday. Here's my passport. Here's my military ID. And they told me, oh, you're a sergeant in the Army. So, oh, you think you something, you think, you think you're going to tell us about investigations. You don't know anything. This is you. And you're going to jail for this. I had no idea what they're talking about besides seeing the picture in the photo. Right. And so thank God, man, somebody saw me while that was happening. One of my friend's mother was passing by in a minivan and she just turned around and she saw my car still there and she came to the police station. She figured something happened. And if she didn't come in there and ask where I was at and what was happening, I don't know what could have happened to me. But all I know is they released me they said, you know, you can find your car. There's not many, you know, car places, tow truck car places around here. You can find it, and they just released me to her. You know, and so I had to pay those fines and do all those things, and it just let me know, man, it didn't matter what I did, no matter who I was, and no matter what uniforms, no matter where I came from, that I was still the same, right? This is where you came from, and welcome home, welcome back, right?
So this is not anything new, because as you were describing this story, I know that Mike Wiley, who is a friend of mine, has done a whole piece about Booker T. Spicely and some of the things that he went through when he was coming back. And this would have been like in the 50s or 60s or something along those lines, though it was definitely after one of the wars. So it sounds like it's the same thing, even though what was happening with you was after 9/11. So we're talking about the 21st century, whereas his was more like in the early 50s or early 60s. I'm trying to remember the exact year, but it sounds like it's decades may have gone by, but the impact was still the same, even the way that you were treated some 50 or 60 years after the Booker T. Spicely incident and all along those lines. So it sounds like it hasn't got better in some ways for our African American soldiers.
Let me add one thing to that, you know, because I don't want to be remiss on this call and you bring up the Lumbees. You know what I mean? The Lumbees had a really, really great guy that we lost in our community back in the years about 99, 2000. His name was Chief, right? And this guy was a great guy in our community. Everybody loved him at school. And, you know, he had a nice car, nice truck. And because he had a nice truck and his family was doing okay, you know, he was pulled over here in Richmond County. He was pulled over. And by the time the family got to him, they lied. The story is pretty deep. His name is Chief. You can look it up and people can research it. And, you know, I'll just say the story ends with the family going home after they're being told that he is being processed in jail. After he's processed, they'll call him and they'll let them know. And this young man was in the hospital fighting for his life. And when they got to the hospital, one of his sisters was one of the ones that has been advocating for him for years. She got to the hospital and Chief, man, I mean, the condition of this person was almost unrecognizable. He had dog bites all over his body. His eyes were bulging. She believed that when she came to the stop earlier that day where he was pulled over at, and they had him in a police car and they refused to let her go to see him in the car, where they had the heat turned up in the car on him, and it was in the summertime, and she believes that he passed away then. Wow. And they just told them to go home and they give her a call, right? And so that story, every time I think about even me just being pulled over like that, even being here, I know that reality exists for us. So it don't matter whether we call ourselves Lumbees or we call ourselves PD or we call ourselves Tuscarora. It doesn't matter if we call ourselves Saponi, Cherokee. If you look like us, if you look like this, if you got dark skin, just like the same people they met when they first came here, when DeSoto traces his history, when David Ingram does a story, and David Ingram's narrative from Queen Elizabeth, and he comes through all of these areas of the PD, all the tribes, and he meets all of us, right? And that's why we carry this name today, right? It's because of him, 1500s, right? So our history is deep, but we got to continue bringing all of these things from the past right to the future so that we can identify that there isn't a break in our history. There isn't a break in our stories. We're connected to the Lumbees. The Lumbees are connected to us. The Cherokees are connected to us. We're a whole family if they would just allow that to be and just bring truth, truth to power. If we just told the truth about who we are and who our family members are, where we came from, and the reason that this big fight, has been about the land, who is getting the land, who is going to take the land, all while the United States, the federal government, the state governments, all the corporations are taking all the resources from our land. They're depleting our resources. And I don't understand why nobody wants to fight about or even speak about our rock quarries, right? And the damage that it's doing to our communities, right? There's just so much damage and so much value there And the fact that people are frustrated. I mean, they're frustrated here. I mean, they can't live in their houses because the house is shaking. Their
Right.
water is coming up muddy because they dug for 70 years in this rock quarry. They've dug in this rock quarry so deep that they've started digging in 3 different locations now, new locations in other black communities where the black people once owned the land, but possibly lost it due to fraudulent, tax sales or liens or corporations just coming in and, getting just one person.
Yeah, Sean, and definitely, Will, if you can speak to that, because I know one of the things that people are oftentimes concerned about, even here in Durham, is the whole notion of eminent domain and all along those lines. Because a lot of times the government will find ways to take your land and everything in that space. But I do know it's important for us to maintain what land we do have, because there was a time that black farmers owned a whole lot of acreage and everything like that. But unfortunately, a lot of that acreage has been taken away from us by corporations, by definitely governments and a number of other things. And sometimes they'll use that whole notion of eminent domain to grab the property that probably belonged in your family for a number of years. So I'm sure that y'all are fighting that in Richmond County as well. So how are y'all dealing with the whole notion of eminent domain and making sure that people are not taking the land away from us that actually rightfully belongs to us?
That's right. I'm glad you make that statement. It's really important. These are political avenues and different types of languages and words that people use to discredit our existence, right? Like eminent domain, tax property, all of these elevated words on top of our land. So when you get a society of people who have heard their entire lives that property can be taken, it can be, the government can come in and do this and these things, well, it leaves no effort to fight.
Yeah.
It's already a sealed deal when you hear something like eminent domain or Amazon data center, $13.6 billion. That money, that eminent domain word doesn't scare indigenous people.
Doesn't mean anything. It's, money, numbers. The only numbers that we're concerned about is the numbers of the people that live here, which is 42,000 in Richmond County. There's
Wow.
no other number besides preserving those lives that are here. There's no number that's important. And you talked about dividing before. I mean, that is our whole entire community, right? Whether they identify as white, black, indigenous, African American, Mexican, Hispanic, Portuguese, doesn't really matter, man. The thing is that we can't allow people to continue to tell us in a language that we don't recognize, right?
Right.
I don't recognize that. What does that mean? Right? It's the same thing that it means when they say they won't recognize us, right? That's the language that they're using, right? So since we don't recognize their language, that's the problem that we have, is making that connection with people who are willing to translate that language, right? Because that's all we need. It's not really how do we translate our documents that we have, right? We have documents that tell us that from time to time, because we placed our land in trust with the state and the General Assembly of North Carolina, from time to time, we're supposed to be recognized in order for them to set monies aside to help whatever we need in our community. It was a promise, right? And it didn't say for a limited time. This was a perpetual agreement. When you mentioned, the militia earlier, the United States military is supposed to protect the indigenous people here. And that includes a little thing that they used to refer to as Negroes and Indians, right? They're both in the treaties. We're both in there. Whatever you want to call us, they're both in the treaty, no matter which way you look at it. So eminent domain has nothing to do with that. We can layer, they can continue to layer with laws and things like that. But underneath all of that is the fact that we own our land and we still have it. And the issue is we can never lose it. As long as we live on it and we're here to protect it, we can never lose it. And, and I don't talk about politics. Well, I do talk about politics, but I'll tell you, there's a story about a certain place right now where they're doing this exact same thing, where they're moving into people's houses, taking their land, and then saying that it's ours. It belongs to us. It was promised to us. Well, we have the promise written down, right? So there's nobody that could tell us the promise that even if it wasn't written down, that it wasn't already given to us because we're the only people that's always been here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do y'all say to the? Because you mentioned that there is that population that is down there in Richmond County as well. I know a lot of people that are of Latin population and everything like that. They're concerned about what ICE is doing or not doing, and all in that space. So I'm thinking that part of your coalition probably also includes some of the people that are fighting for their rights in the Latin population. Because I do know there's a growing Latin population that exists in that community as well. So how are y'all helping them in their fight? Because we do know that ICE is just sometimes randomly going and picking up people without even asking questions as to whether they are from this country or not. And my understanding is some of these people have been working in the community for a number of years, maybe even decades, and had their jobs and were solid citizens and everything like that. But ICE is still going up there and scooping them up and sometimes taking them to countries that weren't even their native countries. They might be taking them to a whole country that wasn't even the country that they were originally from. And like I said, sometimes it's second generation people, so they've never been to the country that they identify with and everything like that. So how are y'all dealing with the whole ICE situation? Because we know that's a big conversation that's taking place here in North Carolina as well.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of things, having a background and international background. I used to work internationally in Taiwan and Southeast Asia for many years, so I can understand where this immigration has a huge effect on the not just the people but the economy and things of that nature. So one of the things that we do in our coalition is try to unify around clean water, things that really affect us as a people. We're human first before we are anything, and there's certain things that we have to do together. We have rainbow. Our family is rainbows, right? People in our community, we're all a rainbow. So we're in this fight together. We're all one people essentially, but we have to really organize around. People in Richmond County are dying, every day, right? And there's so much political stuff out there that that I don't even know where to go, because we have to establish some type of protocol for educating everybody in our community on what's going on in from a propaganda standpoint, right? And how much control do we really have, right? And I don't really speak of certain organizations and certain things when it comes to certain particular politics, because it gives too much power.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to give power to folks that don't deserve the power and everything like that. You talked about clean water, and I know clean water has been an important issue, not just here in North Carolina, but throughout the country. There have been incidences dealing with it in Florida. Of course, there have been incidences like we talked about in Flint, Michigan. I want to say that there was even incidences when Hurricane Sandy took place way back when in New York and everything like that. So clean water can definitely be an important issue, and sometimes it is things like with Hurricane Sandy, and even Katrina down in New Orleans, that are natural disasters that can also impact the water quality as well. Because I remember going up, actually, it wasn't with Angaza, but it was with another group that he knows, the Solidarity Center, and we went up to a conference that they were involved in, and all along those lines in New York City. And I remember seeing that was the cleanest I'd ever seen the bridges going into New York, because they had kind of got cleaned out by Hurricane Sandy when that took place. So the highways didn't have as much graffiti because they had got cleaned out by the weather and everything like that. I'm sure the graffiti is back now, but at that particular time it was cleaned out by what was going on with the hurricanes and everything like that. So how much are you connected with other organizations and other places around the country and maybe even around the world that are facing these issues? Because we know it can be an issue. We have a gentleman from Bangladesh that is on this network quite often, and it can even impact other countries like Bangladesh and places like that. So how much are y'all connecting with global communities as well as communities here in the United States that are dealing with this clean water issue?
Well, yeah. So with the coalition, I mean, we're really trying to, with we'll use say of the data center because when we look at this Amazon data center and this AI stuff, like this really has really connected the world, right? In a sense, when it comes to all of the world's pollution. When we're organizing with the Environmental Justice Network, when we're organizing with Clean Water for North Carolina, and let's not forget National Conference of Black Lawyers, who have been really tremendous, really help in our fight for clean water, really trying to bring those different networks in from across the country and people with really different ideas on how we center this, not just locally, statewide, but really international. Even with the work that Black Workers for Justice have done and National Conference of Black Lawyers did in Cuba, but also really looking at the aspect of how do we bring this Richmond County issue of clean water to a bigger front. We have July 30th, we're having a press conference and also a public hearing for these Amazon data air
For
permit.
DEQ air quality hearing. It's the
Thank
first
you.
time that we're going to be able to speak for this Amazon data center. Their proposal is 57 gas turbine generators for the data center, and these generators are huge. And so our connection with the community and making sure that we touch base with the other organizations here in Richmond County is the concentration has been on the water. And the main reason it's been on the water is because without that water, we can't live here. We can't grow our food because we're farmers. We can't clean the produce when it comes through, or even the poultry. And so it's been a huge deal for us to make that connection with our water, with our contaminated water. And you say internationally, as far as internationally, Sean's had a trip to Memphis. I've been out in Kansas, and making Kansas announced that they were going to have a new data center over by the stadium. And so I was able to be there and be present and kind of understand what was happening here in that community, because the same situation in Richmond County and any other community like Memphis, the people that is affecting, they look like us.
Yeah.
The majority.
No, it's definitely impacting us, even like in Flint, Michigan, because I've actually got some family members that are in that area. So it's definitely impacting our minority communities. It's been doing that for a while. Just to you two gentlemen, who are some of the people that have influenced you in your activism work? I imagine that Angaza is one of them. I know that I'm a good friend with Ben and Dante, who have been involved in the Fight for 15 and a number of other things. And of course, a lot of people are good fans and big supporters. I know that my mom is a supporter of Reverend Barber and all along those lines. So who are some of the people that have inspired you, whether they're past people, because we talked about Malcolm X and to some degree Martin Luther King in some of this earlier conversation as well. So who are some of the people that have inspired you two gentlemen, either currently or in the past?
Great question. We grew up with our elders. It's 9 of us. I'm number 9 of my family, so I'm the baby, and my brother's number 7. And we had some Fannie Lou Hamers in our family. My mom, my dad. The people in our community. I mean, if our Richmond County was a movie, we had those Malcolm X's, we had those Fannie Lou Hamers, we had those Hueys. We had them, and we had great scholars in our. We are great scholars. We're great orators in our community. So that's who I look up to when I go and I read books and I see the movies of Malcolm X and I read about his life and I see about Black Panthers and things that they've contributed and all of these people. I mean, I grew up with Tupac. That's Nas. And Nas is from Richmond County. That's our generation of people that we really, saw within our community how to be real strong people. The strong people, not leaders, people. The strong people. We had those minds in our community. My mom, she's strong. Just be strong. You are who you are. It's in the blood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say that, you know, a part of us just growing up and having, I had 22 uncles and aunts
Mhm.
on my dad's side, right? And so just growing up with all of the different types of energies and the different characters, I mean, you really get, before you get to go out into the world, we left the world. When we left our world, we went out into the world carrying all these people with us. So anybody that introduced themselves to us, I'm not going to say they could never be our heroes, but we already had heroes. And so going out into the world, there was really no need, you know, but you did ask, and you know, Angaza is one of my new heroes. I'll say that,
Okay.
man, because he's still here, he's present, he's fighting every day, and he's not going to give up for his community. And neither in his community is my community, because we're family. We're all family. And when we learn that connection, and it goes back to that indigenous connection, or whether whatever type of indigenous it is, right? Um, we know that our job is to protect our land, protect our air, and protect our water, right? And Vietnam veterans like Robert F. Williams, who is one of my heroes, right? He was right here next to us, next to in Monroe, right? And so that history and that narrative of him having to come back and me being here in 2026, and that was in 1956.
Right.
I, I can't fathom the fact that here I am, here we sit, and I've refused to play the game of redoing things that my ancestors have already done, and that
Right.
folks who are sitting in positions are already aware of that they need to address. And so that's where we live at, is in this world of reality where politics, eminent domain, rules, laws. I mean, this is a lawless country. That's what we see it as. It's lawless. Can you not? I mean, if people can't see that this is a lawless country right now, you can't see it, and you can't believe that we can't simply take care of people right now and provide them with a decent place to live, a decent wages if they choose to work, or
Right.
give them the option to create their own entrepreneurship like they always have, like we always have. You know, so those are realistic things that I know that would take people out of the constant concern that they have about their life and about just living, right? We always just wanted to be, right? That's the only thing my grandmother used to say you know, Robert, you know, we just want to be. We always just wanted to be left alone. Just leave us alone. Let us be with our children. Let us be with our grandchildren. Let us go fishing. Don't come to us with, what are you doing there fishing? You need a permit. What are you talking about? My grandmother and my grandfather, they didn't know anything about that. They had been fishing at these places and moving on their land without being unmolested. That's the right
Right.
word, right? And so
Yeah.
we know the reality of where we came from and where we're headed. And so there is no confusion about that. We just want to allow people to steer us in the wrong direction. So thank God for, you know, I say thank God for people who are present, but thank God for people like Ngaza, my father, my mother, Nathanette, and these pillars in our community that are still here, still present, and still willing to fight for their families, no matter what color they are, no matter where they come from. They're willing to fight.
Yeah, they wouldn't fight on a regular basis and everything like that. I know one of the things that Angaza talks about, and I mentioned that they got a new CD that's either out or about to be out and everything like that. But how important do you think it is for us to use our cultural voice, whether that's poetry or whether that's music or a number of other things, to get these messages out? I'm not sure if either of you two gentlemen are part of the singing group that is part of the whole narrative and everything like that. But how important do you think it is for us to use our cultural voice in order to get these important messages out there? Because I know that definitely Angaza and his son has been very much involved in that, because I know the son is also a producer in addition to being a musician himself as well. So how important do you think it is for us to have that cultural aspect? And like I said, I'm good friends with Dasan Ahanu, who is a poet here in the area and all along those lines, and is about to actually get married in October, if I remember the date correctly, because I was teasing him about that because it's around the corner. He's like, I'm not nervous yet. Ask me that in September. I might be a little bit more nervous because it'll be closer and everything like that. But definitely, how important do you think it is for us to use our cultural voices?
State of Emergency. That's the name of the album, State of Emergency. State of Emergency every day. I mean, it's really important. You know, we're storytellers, And when the people first arrived on the shores of the Petey River, they heard voice. They said they heard voices of angels,
Mhm.
right? And I'll tell you where that voice of angels were coming from. It was coming from Holly Grove Church,
Okay.
right? Back in the 1700s. And it drew the voices of the people from the land and the water, drew people in, right? Their voices drew them in. You know, that they had that what they call the vibration, right? They were vibrating the people. There's many different ways to speak languages. We can speak languages by voice. We can speak languages by singing, our singing voices. You know, birds do it. They communicate all the time, right? This is really what I call um, primitive
Mhm.
thing, that how what we use to communicate. But singing is the way that we do it. You know, using drums, using sound. We've always communicated in that fashion. It really it's soul, right? It's soul. That's how our people communicate with each other, through our soul, and through our voices. And it's not even necessary what we're saying is what's vibrating from our soul. So I think it's really important to to make sure that's a part of our culture, because people don't even understand that that is a part of our culture. That's how we communicate, through voice, through sound, through singing, through drums, choirs and odysseys and what they call jubilees.
Mhm.
There's so many things that we do to communicate. Singing isn't just about having a good time.
So,
We're sending a message. So that's why the Fruit of Labor Singing Ensemble. Some of their songs are some of my favorite ones. I love to get up and dance for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
tell you, Martin Lee, we have a good time. It's not always about having a good time, but when the energy and the message and the spirit connects, it's a great thing. And so when you go to that culture center and you feel that connection, and then you can go back home or go back to your community and you feel that sense of state of emergency because you got the message, man, I think it's the only way. It's what we've used for a long time to tap into each other's frequency, and it taps into a place in us that resonates, you know. So
because
I think it's very important for us to be a part of it. And whenever we there,
yeah,
I'm not gonna
it's
say
some
I
good
can sing.
songs.
I ain't
It's
gonna say I
it's
can sing, but man, I really do. I get the feeling that I'm a part of their group.
yeah. Yeah, and along those same lines, I don't think he's that far from y'all in Richmond County, but a good friend of mine. I need to get in touch with him because I think we share, if I remember correctly, matter of fact, I know we share the same birthday, which is July 1st, and everything like that. So I just had mine 2 weeks ago. But Gerard Morrison is the founder of the John Coltrane Music Edutainment Festival, which is there in Hamlet. And I know that a lot of times he can even give you a whole breakdown of people in Hamlet and the surrounding areas in terms of their connection to Hamlet and the Richmond County and a number of other things. So he's definitely an advocate for preserving Coltrane's local legacy and history, but just that history and legacy in general, because he knows like a lot of those political figures that are in that area. And I know whenever I run into Gerard, he can spend about 30, 40 minutes just giving you a breakdown of the people that are connected to the history of that community and all along those lines. So I was wondering if y'all have tapped into Gerard and some of the things that he's doing with his edutainment festival that I know that he does on a regular basis. So,
I actually just talked to his niece 2 days ago.
okay.
So that's our next. That he's my very next contact or connection, right? But I know Jared. I don't know him, but I know him in the community. I've seen him around. I've seen what he's done for the Coltrane Museum and how he brought that to life. He's also a military veteran,
Yeah.
and so him just bringing that whole aspect back to life and bringing Coltrane back home, right
Right.
where he belongs. There's a lot of people that come from this community. We got a lot of football players that are developed and they grow and they're bred and born from here and they go out. And so, our one thing you bring up is that connection. That there's so many of us here that know so much about our rich history that when we come together, it's just like it is fulfilling. You know what I mean? And so that place, I've been there to the Coltrane Museum. I've been to the biggest, one of the first central hubs, which is the
Right.
Seaboard train station here in Richmond County, down in Hamlet. I mean, that hub, the hub that it used to be, it's crazy that that was centrally located between going to New York and Florida.
Right.
Everybody came through Hamlet. I mean, a year, millions of people came through a year on that train. And so just to kind of really connect that museum and the heritage and the people back together is a great time. And it is right time. It's time to do it right now.
No, that history is very important. I know that my grandmother just recently got a award named after her and everything like that because she was the founder of the first Black library there in Raleigh, North Carolina. So the Richard B. Harrison Library was founded by Molly Houston Lee. I think that was back in like the 40s or 50s, way before I was born and everything like that. But she literally had to go walking around the neighborhoods of Southeast Raleigh and get people to give money in order to build that library, and that library is still existent today. And there's actually the Molly Houston Lee collection that exists. If you come to Raleigh and go there, you can see her collection. And like I said, it was last year that they named an award for her and everything like that. So Andre Van gave me a copy of the article. I think it was in the Triangle Tribune where they had done a publication about her. So the next award this year will be the second one. And I know that I think Dad went to the first award. I did not get a chance to make it, but hopefully I'll get a chance to make it to some of these other award celebrations because she was definitely a vital part of our history and all along those lines. So I definitely am a big fan of history, both with my own family history, but also having some of those ties. My parents, who Angaza knows, started one of the few African American radio stations that isn't connected to a university. Because usually when we think about African American radio stations, and particularly nonprofits, we think about Fitz and we think about Howard and we think about things like that. But they had WVSP in Warrenton, North Carolina, which is why I knew about the whole Warrenton situation like that. So it existed from like about 76, which is one of the other anniversaries. It was the 200th anniversary till about 87 or 88 or something along those lines. So it was in existence for about 12 years, but they were very much social activists. My dad had been one of the co-founders of the Malcolm X School that started here in Durham. As a matter of fact, it was founded on my brother's birthday because Mom went to go have my brother when they were doing the dedication of the groundbreaking of that first year and everything like that. And unfortunately, it didn't last as long as we would have liked it to last because it lasted maybe a year or two here in Durham. Then it moved to Greensboro, and then it doesn't exist anymore at all. So it only lasted for a few years, but it impacted those of us that were around even when we were only kids, because I would have probably been 69. I probably would have been 7. So Malik was born, and there's a 7-year gap. I would have been like 7 till maybe 12 would have been the time that center existed and all along those lines. But definitely the radio station has impacted me, and it was good getting to meet Angaza. And like I said, I got to meet him for the first time when he was doing that whole fight around Shoney. So he told you about the Shoney's fight and everything like that, even in his own history and telling stories of what was going on. Because I remember at that time I was working at my second newspaper, because the first newspaper I had after graduating Marquette was the Garner News, and the second newspaper was the Carolinian, which I worked at for 2.5 years before starting to get involved in more cultural activities and history activities and the Hayti Heritage Center and a number of other things that I'm still involved with to this day and everything like that. So did he ever tell you about that whole Shoney's fight? Because that was the first time that I really met him, was when he was fighting to some of the Shoney's workers that were dealing with some of the injustices they were dealing with now. Because we know that the nurses are not getting paid enough. The workers at UNC are not getting paid enough. So he's been involved in a lot of those fights as well and everything like that. So I just wondered if he's talked to you about some of his earlier history.
Yeah, he shared those stories. I mean, he shared those stories about Greensboro and Winston-Salem, and even events that happened in up in New York when he was up there, and just really things that rooted who he was, right? That made him realize, man, that what he was doing had purpose. And so, just listening to him and being mentored by him and kind of listening to everything that he's been through. And sometimes you always know that people are always watching you, right? All the time, people are watching you. And sometimes people want to know if you're willing, what you're willing to do, and if you're willing to always do the right thing when nobody's looking. And I'm just great. I'm happy in that the opportunity presented itself for us to really be connected. And when Imperial Food when he talked about Imperial Foods and Nathan, that they conveyed that to us that, I was a child. I was only 10 years old when Imperial Foods happened. And, they were so traumatized being at school, and then people being missing, and then going home and seeing it on the news at 4 o'clock because it happened about that time. And just everybody was talking about it, or people would get in their cars trying to race down to the plant to try to help their people get out of there. And they just couldn't do it. So just listening to that and seeing a real person who was that interested and that motivated and dedicated to continue consistently to come down here to Richmond County, to this rural area, to fight for our family members, even though we didn't even know we needed to be fought for, right? It's that.
Yeah.
That's who I know.
Yeah. Sean, and we're going to wrap up shortly and everything like that. Sean and Will, where do you see yourself in your own activism, say 5 or 6 years from now? I know a lot of times people are hoping that they will never need to be as active as they are, but I know that in my life I consider myself an activist, and have been an activist probably since I was a youngster, being the parents of Jim and Valeria Lee, and definitely having activism in my life for a number of years and all in that space. But I just wondered, where do you hope that you are 5 to 6 years from now, and all along those lines, and how important do you think that it is to be an activist in the 21st century?
Well, we get it from our ancestors, and some claim 1492, that people have been here in America encroaching on our people. So it's a state of emergency every day. I mean, for years to come, it's been, we're here. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We've been here. It doesn't matter what issue, problem arise, whether it's corporation, whether it be whoever it may be. We're not going anywhere. There's always a fight on our hands in life. I'm not thinking that it's going to be rainbows and sunshine in 20 years. But what I do know is that this work for our people, Black people, Indigenous people, it must continue. It will continue, because we're not going anywhere. And people will always, always continue to try to deny us, not of our skin, but who we are.
Yeah. Hey, Will, along those same lines and everything like that, what do you tell people that are thinking that they want to give up their land? Because like I said, we did have a tremendous amount of Black land, and there's still some people that have land even there in Richmond County, but sometimes they are being approached to sell their land, give their land. I know that even my mom has been approached by giving land, and sometimes they don't even know what land that they're asking for, because mom laughs at one of the properties that they want to that she's gotten calls about, because it is literally the family cemetery, and she's going like, I want the family cemetery and everything like that. And she would never sell that because it is our family cemetery. But she also realized that some of these people that are calling don't even realize what they are asking for. They just see a land plot and they're not even thinking of what the plot is and everything like that. So I just wondered, what would you tell the people that are being approached about selling their land, particularly when we know for historical standpoint that we have given away a lot of our land?
Well, I mean, you asked that question, but I think it comes to one of the questions you asked earlier: preservation, right? Preserve your land, preserve your cemeteries, preserve your burial sites. If your church gets too old and people are not going there anymore, turn it into a museum, right? A historic site, right? So people can come visit, people can support. Our families are so big that we can support to have the cemeteries. We can send money. We make enough that we can send money to our family members and make sure it's the right ones, that they can go out and take care of our cemeteries if we can't be present. Same thing for our churches, same thing for our schools. There's a lot of Rosenwald schools that are around that need to be preserved. And even better than that, we had schools here in Richmond County that existed before Rosenwald was even thought about, right? And so those are schools that we need to preserve too, that have always existed in our communities, co-located with the burial sites and the churches, right? So I think preservation, there's also options of conservation. There's programs out here with USDA and FSA, your local offices. If you can go there and create a farm tract for your land and put it in the farm tract, it'll help you with your taxes. It'll help you with not having to come up with ideas, you can just conserve it, right? You can have a tree farm, you can have a grass farm. There's all kinds of farms that you can have. People just need to recreate ideas in their head of what it is that we can do to preserve our land, right? They're not making new land, and a lot of people don't have land. They don't have a place that they can say, "This is my home. This is where my people are buried at. All of my family members," right? And so that's my answer to that is preservation and conservation, right? Historic, make them historic markers, right? But we need to get on that as Black folks, right? Just to identify the importance of our historic communities. There's a lot of them, and we need to start making sure we put our stamp here so that the people after us won't come here. And just like Shaka Zulu said, what happens when your children and your grandchildren and my grandchildren are here? Will they believe that the land is theirs then? Or will they still remember that they came here as guests?
I said that you bring that up because I know here in Durham there is a whole community that has been fighting to preserve one of those cemeteries, which is the Gear Street Cemetery community, and all along those lines. So they've been doing a lot of preservations. And like I said, I work at the Hayti Heritage Center when I'm not doing stuff here on this podcast network, and also working with a testing company, which are my three primary jobs and everything like that. But I do know that at the Hayti Heritage Center, that is what it is. It is a former site of the St. Joseph's Church, which still exists, and all along those lines, but it became a cultural arts center back in 1975. So last year we were celebrating our 50th anniversary, and this year is our 51st. And like I said, Bakari Sellers will be there on Friday. So the day after tomorrow, he'll be in town talking about politics and some of the things that we've been talking about as well, and all along those lines. So he'll be there giving a discussion. There's Brian Kennedy, and I'm trying to think of the young lady, Marianne Tindy, I think is her name, but they will be the ones moderating that discussion and everything like that. So it should be a great discussion. They could go to Hayti, but I've been working with an intern. I was joking with Angaza a couple of days ago. I've been in the field for a number of years, whether it's event coordination or whether it's been and working with the Blues Festival and a number of other things that I've been involved with, including the newspaper world. But I don't ever remember having an intern. So I got my first intern that was helping me with doing some of the history documentation over there at Hayti. We've been finding all kinds of interesting documents, including some statues and some drums and some old pictures from the Blues Festival, including one that featured Isaac Hayes. But we also found a picture of a middle ground, because a lot of people, if they know Hayti, they know that it started as a brush arbor, which means that if it's been like 100 degrees like it's been out here today and everything like that, people were having church service literally outside. I can only imagine what that would have been like in this kind of weather and everything like that. I was not there, and I'm glad I wasn't there, because I'd rather be in my AC room and all along those lines. But it went from that in 1869 when the freed slaves bought that property and everything, where the church lives, or the center lives now, and where the church used to live. And the church was built in 1891 and everything like that. So they've actually celebrated their anniversary at our location. I think that was right before the pandemic and everything like that. But then one of the pictures that we found was that there was a log cabin. So apparently in between the brush arbor and the church, they were having service in the log cabin. So we just found a picture recently when we were going through documentation and everything like that, but it was of the log cabin. Because I was trying to figure out, I was like, they had to do something in between here, because it's the nice church-like structure now, and that's probably what it looked like to some degree in 1891. And then you had the brush arbor, which means you were having service outside. There had to have been something in between, and now we know the answer. Absolutely. It was a log cabin and everything like that. So they had a log cabin with services.
Very similar to our story. We have a brush harbor story, and we know that there was a structure there before the story of the brush arbor. They had already had a building, an edifice that they were worshiping in prior to them being removed to the brush arbor when they got dismissed.
Right. Yeah. So similar story and all along those lines and everything like that. Well, you two gentlemen have been great guests. I've definitely enjoyed having y'all on, learning a little bit more about what y'all have got going on, the connection to Angaza and everything like that. There is two questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show, so I will not be remiss and do it with y'all just because y'all were the two that I had today and everything like that. One is I ask all my guests something that people would be surprised to know as a hobby or an interest like that, and all along those lines. Like I used to joke that one of my ex-girlfriends, and it's actually somebody that Angaza knows, that all along those lines, she tried to get me to go skydiving. I'm sorry, to me, planes have a purpose. They're to go from point A to point B. They're not to fall out of. Nothing wrong with you military folks if you did the skydiving and did some of the parachuting, but I just know for me, that's not something I wanted to do. I did think about doing whitewater rafting, and I may still do whitewater rafting or even the hot air balloon at some point or another. And I definitely am very much involved in word puzzles. I like doing word games and stuff like that. But people have different interests and hobbies, and all along those lines. So what's something that people might be surprised to know is a hobby or interest of yours that they haven't learned about during our conversation about Richmond County and the water crisis and all along those lines? And then the other thing that I get all my guests to do is, this is a global network. Pod TV is founded by two friends of mine out of the white community, Nick Palveda, who is a pension attorney, and Kim Calhoun, who is a engineer by trade, and she's also did some stuff around domestic violence and all along those lines. But they founded the network. But one of the things that I do with this show is I believe in positivity. So I get all my guests, no matter whether they're activists or creatives or whatever, to give a message of positivity to our global community. And then if you want to tell folks how they can reach you and how they can get in touch with the you two gentlemen, that would be the other question as well. And then I'm going to play a video, and after I play the video, that might be the final question, because it had something to do with education and everything like that. But you can go, I guess I'll go top to bottom. So Sean, if you can tell folks your something that people might be surprised to know is an interest or hobby of yours, as well as definitely a message of positivity, and how you can be contacted.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that as a hobby of mine, I don't get to do it often, but I like to dance. And if you know me, you would think that he's such an introvert. My birthday was June 30th, by the way. So
Okay.
Happy belated birthday to us cancers. But I like to dance. I really just like to dance, just get it all out. That's why I really love about the Fruit of Labor singing ensemble, because they really got some good songs at State Emergency. So every time they're singing, I'm in the crowd. Elder knows I'm going to get up and dance. So that's one thing about me. But I could be reached at thecoalitionspeaks.org, or you can contact me at 910-760-1955. Again, that's thecoalitionspeaks.org. That's Richmond County Coalition for Justice and Black Empowerment. And the number you can reach me at 910-760-1955.
Oh, and your message of positivity for our global community.
Oh, message of positivity for our global community. Stay elevated, every day. Just elevate yourself, be happy that when we wake up in the morning, the sun is shining, know that you're on the side of that sun, and just elevate yourself, whether if it's eating healthy, eating a healthy snack, running, taking a brisk walk. Elevate yourself. Health is wealth. We can't be here if our health isn't, or work out, go to the gym. These are all positive messages. Elder always says, hey man, you go to the gym today, he's doing kung fu fighting, so make sure you get in the gym and work out. That's the best positive message I can give you.
Well, I appreciate that. And as you say that, before I get the wheel, I am a big fan, and I actually got a good buddy of mine that turned me onto this app, and actually Anthony Wilson uses it as well, the TV anchor and all along those lines. But I have become addicted to Merlin, which is an app that lets you hear the birds, and I definitely do believe in going outside and seeing the birds and the butterflies, and definitely enjoying Mother Nature when you get a chance. So definitely get that fresh air. So I'm a big fan of doing that. Even though I live around the corner from Duke Gardens, I've not been there as much as I need to, but I do need to get by Duke Gardens, because it is a great nature walk that you can see some great plants and some great walks and everything like that. So I do know I need to get by Duke Gardens, but even just going outside, because I know that there sometimes might be some rabbits or butterflies or just animals that are good to observe. And of course, you'll see the regular pets of the neighborhood, like the cats and dogs and things along that line. So definitely I am a supporter of us realizing that we are not alone. We have these animal companions and plant companions that are part of our life as well. So Will, what is your hobby, or something that people would be surprised to know is an interest of yours? Maybe it's something you picked up when you were in the military. Maybe you're one of those people that just want to go parachute out of the planes. I'm sorry, it's not for me and everything like that. But what is a hobby or interest of yours, and what is your message of positivity as well?
Well, I'll just talk about one of my recent hobbies over the last 10 years has been research, right? Researching our local history here in Richmond and Anson County, It's been a real hobby. And I mean, more than just a hobby. I mean, it helped us rediscover who we were and help us be able to tell a story, right? And, just being able to reconnect with that. So that's something that I really like to do whenever I get a moment. I like going to the state archives or going up to Duke University. Wake Forest has a great archive and a historical value to our family, along with our church here, Holly Grove Baptist Church in Cartlidge Creek. Wake Forest was created out of our church. The convention was first held there at our church in 1833. And so Wake Forest was originally organized from the trustees of our church. And so the very fact that that kind of historical value and the reason that it was created was to help educate people like us. It didn't matter what color we looked like or what people called us. We know that the original use for these schools was to educate the indigenous people here. They were the ones who built them. A part of the curriculums were to teach the students how to do masonry work, how to do carpentry work, and those skills were being taught as they build the institutions. So they were the very first students. And so for us to know those facts, that's been a long hobby of mine. And so I'll share that with everybody. And then the second short one is that if you can get me in a good enough mood, sometimes you can get me to sing. And I actually like doing it. It's something that's in our blood as well. I don't announce it a lot, but that's a little hobby I don't really announce a lot. And I don't think Elder even knows that. So there's a little hint. But secondly, you said a positive message. Man, I'll just say, just live every day in the moment. If there's a moment and there's people that are showing up for you and they're consistent and they're there every day and they always have your best interests at heart, don't take them for granted, right? Let them be there, allow them to be there, allow them to help. And sometimes that's a hard thing for a lot of people, like even me, to do, is just allow people to help me, because we're so used to taking care of everything ourselves. And even in doing this kind of work or not doing this kind of work, I didn't even know this was the name of this. I just thought that we were coming back to figure out what was happening here, what's going on. People are sick, right? So activists in that whole word, it's still new to me, right? But I know what it is. And so the longevity of it, like I tell Elder and others, I don't think there's a time limit, right? I think that as long as there's people here not allowing us to just be and to be free and to live a life that they know is just human, right? A little bit of decency. That's all we're asking for. So as long as that problem exists, I think that we'll be in it for a long time. But I tell everybody out there, man, just live in the moment, be consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how can you be reached as well and everything like that?
The coalition speaks.org is our website. Email is Richmond County NC at the coalitionspeaks.org. Phone number, Sean just listed the phone number for us to be reached as well. If anybody want to reach me personally, my personal email is firstamerican81@gmail.com.
Well, I appreciate that and everything along those lines. And I'll tell Angaza maybe he needs to recruit you for the singing group and all along those lines. But I can also tell you that the other thing that I'm involved in, we actually started it at the Haiti Heritage Center, and then it traveled around the country. And lately, Captain has not been doing it for the last couple of years, but Captain Newborn, and that is actually his first name, not his rank, because he never served in the military from what I remember. But we started the Road to the Apollo that lasted for about 11 or 12 years, and we're hoping to bring it back at some point or another. And I know we've been to places like Kinston, we've been to Roxborough, we've been to Fayetteville, and we've been to Henderson and Rocky Mount and a number of other places, and that is connected to the Apollo Theater. So we have a contract with the Apollo where we get to jump the line. To circumvent being in those long lines, it's always a great thing. So we had that contract, and some of our people did well after they won, and some of them even made it to the main stage, and some of them had TV shows. I think one of the young kids was on one of the Tyler Perry shows and everything like that. So I might have to find out about your singing, and once Captain brings it back, maybe we'll have you as a contestant once we bring it back. I'm hoping that we bring it back, if not 2026, definitely in 2027. But I've got to get in touch with Captain and see where we are standing with that, because he also brought a go-go concert. I think that was last year that we did that to Dorton Arena and all along those lines. And I was thinking of a couple of things as you were talking about that whole notion of the Renaissance man, because both of you seem to be Renaissance man. I was thinking about one of the things that exists at Hayti, which is a plaque that talks about the John Avery Boys and Girls Club, and they talk about him being a multi-dimensional man, where he was helping folks in the space of education and not being juvenile delinquents, and all along those lines when he created that particular Boys and Girls Club after having been educated at Kittrell College over there near Henderson and everything like that. So I'm feeling like that sounds to me like they're multidimensional man, just kind of like he was talking about in the description of himself and everything like that. So I was thinking about that quote from him, and I was also thinking about another quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, who talked about the notion of the Black Wall Street and how he knew that we could go from cradle to grave and have everything in our own community. So maybe that's something that we can recreate, because he talked about this notion of you could be born in that area. You could even have a suit designed by a person that was a suit maker in our community. You could even have a mattress made by a brother, and all along those lines, and even have some food that was created from some of our local restaurants. So everything was very much in our community during that Black Wall Street of Durham. And there's a famous quote, and I've just kind of capsulized it in a very short description. But if you go to the center, you can hear how he's talking about literally you could be born at Lincoln Hospital, which was the segregated hospital at the time, and then be buried by one of our various funeral homes and all along those lines. So it was a very powerful quote that he made, but definitely I was thinking about those two quotes in conjunction with our conversation and all along those lines, because definitely he was known as a Renaissance man, John Avery was, and I would say W.E.B. Du Bois and even Booker T. Washington, who had a different philosophy, but still was a Renaissance man as well. So I would consider both of you to be Renaissance man in that sense. I'm going to play this video of a guy out of Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, I believe, if I remember correctly. And of course, that's another Black Wall Street, but he honors educators. And I am a big believer of honoring not just the educators, but the support staff. So one of the things he talks about is honoring like the cafeteria workers, the janitors, the guidance counselors. And mom was a guidance counselor when she was a youngster in her 20s, as well as the resource officers, which might be retired police officers, and all along those lines. And just some of the people that are involved in the school environment, not just our teachers, but he does honor the teachers, but also the support staff as well. And that might even be the janitor and the secretary also. But I was just wondering, in your own school system, who were some teachers that inspired you or that really motivated you in your own life and everything like that? Then I'll play this video and they will all get out of here in that space. But just before I play that video, who are some teachers that inspired you?
Well, I'll say this. I had a third grade teacher. Her name was Miss Meacham. And I had the honor and privilege to actually see her again after I'd say she was my third grade teacher. I'm 44. And I just saw her maybe 7 months ago. And one thing that she's always motivated us that we were all special in our own way, that we were all equal, but we were still different, right? And that was okay. That was the kind of diversity that we had in our class, that we were different, we were still equal, but we had our own levels of equalness, meaning that I might need a little bit more attention than the next person, but it doesn't mean that we're still not equal. One little short story that she told me, she shared with me, was that one of the tasks that she had when she first came to the school was to go and mark whether a child was Black or white. And she said she didn't know what that meant. That was her first time experiencing that. And she didn't look like us, by the way. So she said she didn't come from that type of environment growing up there. And so that was interesting to me, that she said, I didn't recognize anything. I just knew that they were children. They were my children. You guys were my children, so she's one very important person that I think influenced us as an educator, me as an educator.
Yeah. What about you, Sean? And I'll play this video and we'll all get out of here and everything like that. But who is a teacher, and might even be a support staff person, like a guidance counselor or a coach that influenced you as well? So who's somebody that influenced you, Sean?
I'll be honest, to transparent. I had some good math teachers, and I think it was my math teachers, and they know who they are, that really really advanced me. I even went back to my high school and taught math. So I love math. I love numbers. So that was really the influence for me in school, because if it's not add up, if it doesn't make sense, if you can't put it into a equation, you don't have a formula, you can't put it in an equation, then you're not going to get the right answer, right? You have to do the work. So that's what my math teachers taught me, is that, Sean, if you don't do the work, you're not going to find the answer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Before I play this video, I'm just going to tell you really quickly, because I mentioned it on the last show when we did it last week. I remember having a physics teacher, and she was fresh off the boat. I think she might have been from Laos or one of the Asian countries and everything like that. But the story I told was that I remember her doing this whole long, complicated formula, because, physics is filled of complicated formulas. And I remember her in the middle of the writing the formula, and her giving the formula on the blackboard, because there was a blackboard back in that day and everything like that. She turned around to us and she basically said, "I'm not sure that I'm doing this correctly," and everything along those lines. So one of the things that my guest said last week, which I had to think about it, because it was not a husband and wife, a mother-daughter team, is that they actually gave her credit, because a lot of people would not admit that they were making a mistake or that they were not sure of themselves. So they actually thought that it was a good thing that she admitted to us as kids, because like I said, I was probably in 10th or 11th grade, so I was probably like 16 or 17 at the time that she was there, and she would have been probably fresh out of college, so maybe 23 or 24. So there wasn't that much of a difference in us age-wise and everything like that. But as my guest last week said, that was probably a victory, because at least she was admitting to you that she wasn't sure. And a lot of times we like to walk through life pretending like we know the answers and not admitting that we are not sure of whatever the answer was. So I had to reflect on that story, because I told that story on this show a couple of times, and it actually made sense what the ladies told me yesterday and everything. I mean, not yesterday, but last week, this notion of people needing to accept that they don't always know the correct answer. And if you don't know the correct answer, no need to fake the funk, if I can use that term. You might as well just go ahead and admit that you don't know the answer, and then go back and come up with the correct answer. So as they told me last week, I had to think about that. That actually made sense, that she was admitting her own fault. So that was a good story.
That's how you learn and grow.
Exactly. That's how you learn and grow. You admit what you don't know and everything like that. So I'm going to play this video of the gentleman from Oklahoma, and then we're going to get on out of here. But you two have been great guests. Hopefully I can get you back on some future shows, and I'm hoping to get Angaza on at some point as well. But I'm glad that I was able to have this conversation with you two gentlemen, and y'all were amazing guests here on the Online Dinner Party, where I bring activists, creatives, and definitely educators as well, and various others on the regular basis. So every Wednesday between the hours of 4 and 6, sometimes it ends a little early, sometimes it goes a little longer and everything like that. But it's always a chance for us to have rich conversations and learn from each other, and all in that space. So I think y'all will be episode 171 or 172. So we've been doing this now for a while, doing the five and a half years of this particular network. And I've been doing the Online Dinner Party for about 3 or 4 of those years and everything like that. So y'all have been some more great guests, and I'm hoping to get some more guests coming. Matter of fact, I got more guests lined up for the next 2 or 3 weeks and everything like that. But I appreciate y'all both being on. So we're going to check out this particular video from the gentleman out of Oklahoma and let y'all get to the rest of y'all's day. Hopefully y'all going to do like me and get some food at some point, because it is almost dinner time and everything like that. So hopefully y'all will get to dinner, but hopefully y'all had a great time, and I hope that y'all enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
No problem.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold, I won't drop